Hello, I am Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. Here in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, if we've learned anything, it's that we need each other to survive. In Brooklyn and all over New York City, we are different ethnicities, identities, and faiths. My Breaking Bread, Building Bonds initiative, now being conducted virtually, continues to invite everyday people from all walks of life to break bread, share experiences, and see one another as basic human beings. The goal of these dinners, which have been occurring since the beginning of this year, is to empower everyday voices to become new ambassadors of unity. Getting to know one another and learning more about our shared commonalities rather than just our differences. The dinners break down barriers, dispel hate, and eradicate ignorance, the very things that work against us standing strong and peacefully. In the days and weeks ahead, strength and cooperation and peaceful coexistence is needed. We must all work towards a successful transition into our new normal. I wish to thank our partners, the People's Supper, for creating this training video, and the New York Peace Institute for providing helpful tips for our hosts. If you are interested in hosting or participating in one of these transformative dinners, go to my website at www.brooklyn-usa.org or call 718-802-3700 for details.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my dining room table. My name is Kay Scary, and I'm the community director of the People's Supper. I've always been a little bit enamored with life around the table and have found myself enjoying just the chance to commune with people in this space and to know people more deeply. Have found that to be kind of a pillar of my life and my work. When I'm not in People's Supper world, I am a seminary student. I'm getting my master's in divinity at Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C. And I love to connect with folks in my community of Herndon, Virginia, where I'm calling you from today. And then to kick it over to introduce my colleague, DJ.
Hey everybody, my name is DJ Sims. I'm currently in Atlanta. I am a seminary student. I am a second year, about to be a third year, seminary student. And in my spare time, I am, if I'm not doing people supper stuff, because I'm always around the table. I am organizing, I'm teaching, activating, a lot around incarceration. And so that's really what brings me to the table. That's really what helps solidify what I know and helps me connect with people. And so excited to be with you all today.
Yeah. On Martin Luther King Day, the Brooklyn Borough President's Office launched Breaking Bread, Building Bonds in the response to a wave of anti-Semitic hate crimes in the city over the last couple of months. President Adams decided that Brooklyn Borough residents are not going to live in fear or surrender to hate. So instead, they set out to help folks throughout the borough expand their understanding of one another and really deepen relationship with one another. When this coronavirus pandemic hit, they had already hosted more than a dozen suppers, bringing together folks from across racial, religious, and economic lines for a chance to share a meal. We've really enjoyed being able to connect and be thought partners and people just alongside you all in the work. And so we're going to spend about 30 minutes going through some facilitation tips and tricks we've learned along the way and how to move this stuff virtually. The People's Supper, we wanted to start with giving you a little bit of context. We launched the People's Supper in the wake of the 2016 election out of a recognition that we really weren't going to argue our way out of this thing, out of this polarization that felt really acute, particularly in that moment in our country. We used shared meals to build connection and trust among people of different identities and perspectives. Some of my favorite bodies of work that we've gotten to do is we worked alongside the Erie, Pennsylvania Mayor's Office for a 6-month series around racial equity that moved towards policy change in Erie. We've done some work with other communities that are just thinking about what it means to be neighbors with one another, like in Creede, Colorado, or Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Altogether, we've powered more than 1,600 suppers up to this point, and have learned a couple things along the way that we're really excited to be able to share with you today. I wanted to start with kind of three main things you want to think about when you're looking at convening a virtual table. The first is, just for your own knowledge, we're going to be matching you to your guests. So you're not really responsible for thinking about who's going to be coming to your table. We're going to have signups for folks throughout the borough, and we'll be matching them to you. So once we give you the names of people who are going to be gathering with you, your responsibility is to send a confirmation email to all of them. You want to include their instructions on how to log on, reminder to bring headphones if they have it, or otherwise to be in a quiet location. And if someone's using the technology for the first time, you might want to just encourage, hey, download Zoom ahead of time, test it out in advance. And you might even want to offer to be online about 15 minutes early to troubleshoot any technological issues that people might have. The third thing that's really important for you as you're preparing to convene a virtual table is to prepare well. For us, that means familiarize yourself with Zoom. So we're going to provide you some supplemental resources to learn some things about Zoom and get to know it a little bit. Play around with the technology so that you're ready to host and navigate whatever might come. The second is to set up your space. So pay attention to what people are going to see behind you. Make sure you're in a room that's well lit. Plug in your computer so it has plenty of battery. And the third is to think about maybe having a notebook beside you where you might outline the flow of the evening, along with any other notes you might have. We recommend using Zoom for these calls because we've found they're the highest video quality. So the way you do that is when you open your Zoom account, you can hit the word schedule and a window will pop up where you can type in the date and time of your gathering. Then click copy invitation and it'll copy all the information you need to send out. And if you just shoot that along to your guests, they'll be able to log right in. We're well aware in this moment of the reality of Zoom bombers and people who are hacking into spaces and causing some real harm, and we want to avoid that as much as we can. So we want to just make sure that you only share the link for your Zoom meeting with those who are on the guest list. So only doing that in an email. We also recommend that you check the box for require meeting password and for the waiting room option. Again, we'll kind of include some supplemental Zoom training materials that'll walk you through how to do each of those things if you're new to Zoom, but both of those things really allow for some good security and making sure that the only people who are joining you for your conversation are the ones that are supposed to be there. Oh, DJ, I can't hear you.
Not bad.
There you go.
Hear me now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in and talk about, sorry about that, some video chat etiquette. And so with Zoom first, we want to encourage everyone to be on video, just so we can continue to with each other by seeing each other. Earbuds or a headset were great for volume control or to maximize volume and to be able to hear one another. And it kind of, for number 3, encourage everyone to mute their microphone if they're not speaking. If they wish to speak, then to unmute. And this just helps to minimize background noise and to make sure that, we can see one another and hear one another when someone speaks. And if someone does want to speak, then just have them raise their hand or a reaction as a visual cue. And lastly, encourage pauses. We, want to hear from people, but also want to rest in the silence. If someone says something powerful, we want to take that moment just to honor it and name the silence in the conversation. And so something that's always helpful is to map backwards. And so as you think about planning for this event, what do you want in this moment? What do you want to feel as a host? What is your intention? And so it's the end of the night and the supper's ended. And what do you want that feeling to be? And so that'll kind of guide our conversation as we talk about planning and hosting. Something that we start with that every host starts with is what we call an invitation to brave space. And so I won't read this entire slide, but I do want to read the invitation to brave space. And you can also have your guests read this. You can put it in Zoom, we put in the chat box, read together, or have people, just kind of jump in as a host, but that's something to think about as well. But you do want to read this or invite people to read this with you. So I'll read it now. It says, together we will create brave space. because there's no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we all have caused wounds in this space. We seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together. And we will work on it side by side. And so this can just be used as a centering moment. So as a moment to kind of center down and to invoke the conversation that you guys are about to journey on together. And also planning, one thing about ground rules. And so just be very simple, to be present, to, phones down, notifications off, to be in a place and time where you can fully engage with the people around you. Using I statements, avoid advice giving. We respect in this moment that there is no fixing, no saving, no correcting each other. I didn't know, for me, that's really difficult. I'm solution oriented, so I always want to rush to a solution. But sometimes this isn't the time for that. To be patient and respectful when speaking in terms, in speaking times. Notice that if you're talking more than others, step back. Or I'm gonna give others a choice to be heard. I think the best way I've heard to put is to watch my mic time. To be aware of that. Beware of erasure. And this simply is not erasing someone's story because you feel like it's not as powerful or it's not as valid as yours or someone you went through. An example of this is someone who maybe lost their parakeet or their bird, and you say, "Oh, well, that's okay. I know what you're feeling. I lost my brother." Now, while those two losses are losses, obviously maybe one hurt more than the other, but that's not our place to say. And for that person, losing their parakeet could have been one of the worst things that ever happened to them. And so just honoring that and not erasing other people's stories. And lastly, keeping it confidential. What's said at the table simply stays at the table. And so not sharing or posting intimate details about this conversation with other people.
I'm going to share a little bit about how we think about the kind of flow of the evening. So I would recommend, kind of like we said before, to jump on a little bit ahead of time and invite people who might need help with the troubleshooting of the technological piece to jump on ahead of time as well, so you can walk them through some of that. And then say hello as people join. As people are hopping on, you might want to just say hello. We recommend saying hello by name. You'll see the little host hack here is that as people are logging on, their Zoom name is in the bottom corner of their video screen. And so call them out, say hello, welcome them. There's something really powerful about being called by name in a space like this that really invites someone in and makes them know that you see them and you're grateful that they're there. We recommend that you kind of encourage some casual conversation as people are gathering. Where are you calling in from? What were you up to today? Any of those kind of small talk things. I also recommend that you want to start with just naming, hey, I'm going to give folks a couple minutes to join before I'll circle us all back to be able to officially start our time together. You just want to explain to folks what is happening, you just want to explain to folks what's happening in those moments before the call kind of officially starts. You might tell them that you're monitoring the guest list or that you know how many people, and once you have a critical mass, we'll go ahead and get started. So then next is you want to really give a moment where you welcome people to the virtual table. You introduce yourself there and share why it was important to you to gather tonight. And that's kind of the official kickoff of our time together. So it's important to give a moment of, I'm going to circle us up and start with a welcome here. Next is that sharing of those ground rules and the brave space that DJ named. And like he explained, we find those are really helpful to kind of set the tone for our time together. I'm going to invite people to recognize their own co-creation of this space with you. We recommend after that just offering a toast or a blessing, something quick and simple, as easy as to the chance to gather with each one of us tonight, or You might offer that everyone shares the name of someone they're thinking of this evening as they gather with one another. And then from there, you'll kick off the conversation. So start with introductions. Our favorite is tell us your name and the story behind it. And then welcome people to share where they're calling in from. After that, we'll introduce discussion questions, which we'll go over in a moment, and then a closing and reflection about 15 minutes before your time together is to end. So the way the People Supper works is we use kind of 3 carefully crafted discussion questions to really get conversation flowing and get us to a place of real deep story sharing with one another. These are questions that anyone can answer and that are intended to kind of arc to greater depth over time. But something important about them is that though they've been chosen with intention, we don't expect you to force it, and we don't expect you to treat this like a script. They're supposed to be tools to get people talking and not something you have to move through all of them. So you might just get to the introductions, or you might get through all 3 questions, and either of those things is fine. So like we named, start with your name and the story behind it. Then you move into those discussion questions, and we recommend, especially in the moment of COVID-19, to start with, hey, how are we feeling? What's it been like for you lately? We recognize that in this moment, there might be somebody who's experienced significant loss or who's anxious about the people they love or about their own health or about finances, in a moment where our lives have been upended and it's difficult to process, and where connection is harder in some ways. And this might be the only real moment of connection they have in a pretty significant period of time. Start with just hey, I just want to know how we are, and give people some space to name what's been coming up for them. Next is to move towards a question that might be like this. Take a moment to think about a time of struggle or hardship in your life. What did you do that helped you get through it? How did this experience leave you changed? And then you might close with something like this. Describe a person who's bringing you hope right now, or someone who simply makes you proud of your community. You're going to want to be paying attention to time, and you might name that for folks. Like, I'll keep time for us so you can just be present and not have to look at the clock while we're chatting with one another. So then about 15 minutes before your time is scheduled to end, we recommend just kind of naming that for folks. Hey, I'm noticing we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to move us towards just some reflection on our time together. Recognizing in some ways that there's going to be a moment where we turn off our computers and go from our gathering with each other back to life as it was, maybe in an apartment by ourselves, and that transition piece needs some facilitation. So we recommend closing with everyone sharing a word or phrase that reflects what they're going to take away from our time together, or what they hope to carry with them after we hang up the call. A couple of frequently asked questions that we've kind of already named. The one is, do we have to answer every question? And so again, absolutely not. What we recognize as your role is to just pay deep attention to what's happening in the conversation and chase down where questions are animating for folks, and where there's energy around kind of answers and conversation, and let the conversation linger there. Don't feel like you have to move through all those questions, but use them, like we said, as tools to get people talking. And the second is, does everyone have to share? We say absolutely not. We take this quote from our friends at the Center for Courage and Renewal and say this isn't a share or die event, but it is important to us that the people are choosing silence and not feeling silenced. We recommend everyone introduce themselves, and we recommend that you just every once in a while name, hey, I want to pause and see if anyone else would like to jump in before we move along.
And so with back to me with facilitation tips. And so just 2 quick things about facilitating that we've already kind of talked about before. But the first thing is that you want to mirror back. And so when we say mirror back, what we mean is by letting people define themselves and then honoring their definitions of how they define themselves. And so if someone, for instance, if someone calls themselves a conservative, you don't replace that with Republican. You use the language that they use to define themselves, and let people choose their own labels. And then secondly, just acknowledge if people are sharing their stories, specifically stories that involve hurt and pain and trauma. We've already said it can be easy to want to jump into solution mode, or to want to fix their problem. But sometimes that's not the answer. Sometimes it's really just saying, thank you for sharing your story, or I hear you, or wow, or can you talk more about that? Or what do you need? You know, it's just talking to people and resting with people in that moment, and then honoring that. And so with additional tips, stick with open and honest questions, as Kay already mentioned. Talking about what is an open and honest question, practice active listening, and just using, saying things like, I hear you, I appreciate you sharing that, or, could you, you chose this word, could you tell me why you chose this word? Like, open-ended questions and active listening are crucial in any time at the table. And then any additional tips or guidelines you want to share. We also really reckon with that no two tables are the same. And so there may need to be additional guidelines that you may need to set. And we are also a resource here if you want help or questions on developing what could be additional things that I want to do or need to do. Something that's worked in the past has really been good is step up, step back. So if people are speaking up a lot, asking people maybe to listen or to push themselves to maybe listen more, and vice versa. If people find themselves who don't speak too much, maybe asking them to speak up a little bit more, but to challenge ourselves in this moment. And then just owning the fact that we're going to hurt. We may say something hurtful or insensitive to one another, and just saying ouch or saying oops or saying my bad. And that's part that goes back to the brave space statement that we read, and that this space won't be perfect. And so just owning that and, reckoning with the words that we say. And yeah.
We joke on the team that I like all the most annoying people in the room. And I think that's because I've been all these people at moments in the past, and we try to kind of normalize that we're human coming into these conversations. And in a moment in which we're inviting people to be vulnerable and to share with one another, with people that they may not have met before, it's easy to kind of slip into any of the things we're about to go over, that kind of dominating the conversation or jumping to kind of advice giving as defense mechanisms of sorts. And so we want to give all of the patience for those people, and also give you some tips to kind of redirect them so that they don't derail the conversation altogether. So the people to watch out for, the first is the ball hog. So that's, again, if you notice someone's dominating a conversation, I say your role is to affirm and redirect. So you might say, hey, DJ, thanks so much for sharing that with me, but I'm going to pause you to see if there's someone else that really resonates with your experience, or that finds themselves struck by the way that your story gives them into a window into something they haven't experienced. Or you might just say, I want to pause you right there to just make sure everyone who wants to share has had a chance, but I so appreciate what you've been sharing with us here. The next is the advice giver. So that's as simple as just reminding people that we're not here to fix one another, which is why those ground rules are helpful, because you can kick right back to them whenever you need in the midst of the conversation. The third is the intellectualizer. I always say these are the people that are speaking from the head and not so much from the heart. So they're pulling on the book they just read, or the statistics they saw, or the newspaper article, when this is really a time for us to sink into our own stories a little bit. And so you might just say, hey, do you mind talking about that from your own experience? Or will you tell us what some of that was like for you? The last thing is that it's important to just remind people they have a right to their own feelings, and that they don't have a right to deny others theirs. Every person who's coming into this space is an expert in their own story, and no one else is. Along with those things, we recommend that you kind of avoid phrases like, don't you think that? Or, hey, but what can we do about it? Or, don't you think we should be doing this instead of feeling angry or sad? That kicks back to kind of some of the facilitation tips that DJ mentioned, where erasure and those things, you want to avoid kind of any moment that might belittle what someone's bringing and offering to the space. Lastly, in this moment of COVID-19, we want to just highlight that there's some additional guidelines about what to and not to say. So our friends at Awaken, who offer interactive workshops for today's workforce to address diversity and inclusion, leadership, and culture questions, have come up with these guidelines that we find really helpful. The first is to call out racism and xenophobia. With uncertainty certainly comes fear and anxiety, and that can make us prone to make hasty decisions that cause harm, or just to kind of blurt things out. And we've seen it. We've all seen it. Anti-Asian and Chinese racism is on the rise globally in this moment, and it's important for you as a host to be vigilant about calling out harmful and biased narratives around the coronavirus if they come up at your table. The next is that how we discuss the situation matters. I've said some well-intentioned comments that I was trying to comfort someone, but actually had an unintended consequence of further marginalizing those who are most vulnerable. So if you're saying to somebody, oh, but you're young, you're healthy, you don't have to worry about it. The implication of that is for those at the table who may not be young or healthy, or who may be worried about someone they know who's not young or healthy. We just want to take this issue seriously and do our part to ensure equitable resource allocation, and by minimizing potential transmission, and just thinking about the implications of the ways that we're comforting one another in the midst of this conversation. So similarly with that is just be mindful of the impact of this situation on caregivers, particularly to the elderly, to infants, or to folks who are immunocompromised. And we can just be mindful of that in the ways we're talking about it, in the language we use, and in kind of just our acknowledgement that this is a moment of really incredible pain and fear for folks. The last is to mitigate dissemination of false information designed to spread fear and hysteria. We've all seen it. We know what that looks like, and we all know that it's actually not even a little bit helpful. So we recommend that you and your guests share only verified information by trusted sources to fight against misinformation if it comes up at your table. Take a deep breath, friends. We have made it through. We are, again, grateful for your willingness to step in as a host and for convening space in a moment when people are longing for connection. Your role here matters, and we are cheering you on, throwing a lot of information at you, and we trust you. We trust you to host a conversation well, to pay attention at your table, and to gather folks accordingly. And we're grateful to be part of the work with you. So cheers, and we will see you all at supper.